people, it's Ashley, and this is Let's Talk Recovery Houston. So I'm super excited, and I say that every time because I'm always excited about my guests. So today, this is pretty cool. We have Sasha, who is a major part of Archway. You're like the head honcho over there, right? Yeah. And so she is going to share her story and her journey, and then tell us a little bit about what Archway is for people that might not know. And so with that, Miss Sasha, it is all on you.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor. I know you've had some really amazing people on this show, so to be a part of a dynamic tradition, I really, really appreciate it.
No, and I'm excited to have you on. I always get excited about my people because most of them I haven't heard their stories yet, so I'm just like kind of quiet a lot because I'm like learning like everybody else. So it's just, I don't know, it's just neat to get to hear people's story. Especially now when we don't really have meetings, is often. And sometimes a lot of people that come on are people that they might not get asked to share their story at like a Post Oak or a Spring Branch or whatever, but they have an important story.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to tell mine.
Yay!
So I'll just out myself right away that I'm 42 years old. And although I think working with teens my whole life has kept me feeling young on the inside, even though my body's falling apart on the outside in some ways.
No, you look good.
You're a sweetheart. Thank you. Fishing for that compliment. Thank you for giving me what I was looking for. So I was born in the 70s, in the late 70s, and I grew up here in Houston. So I've lived in Houston my whole life.
You're a Houstonian.
I am, for real. But it's interesting because I grew up very different culturally than the way that I look. So one of the challenges that I had growing up, and I think it was one of the things that contributed to why I wanted to use alcohol in particular, and drugs, was feeling like my insides and my outsides didn't match up. So my dad is a native Texan and has been for generations, but my mom is from Mexico City. She didn't actually become a U.S. citizen until I was in high school. And so even though I look like a white girl, I grew up very culturally Hispanic, like Mexican, very culturally Mexican Catholic. And so it was a weird kind of paradox of growing up in Houston, in Bel Air in particular, where I was treated one way because of the way I looked on the outside that didn't match up with who I felt like I was on the inside. And people not being able to look at me and then know basic things that you would know or assumptions that you would make about people. So, I mean, just in terms of like really racist, horrible things that people would say about Hispanic people that they'd say in my presence, not understanding
knowing
that they're talking about
right.
their family. So little things like that. So definitely one of the challenges of growing up looking white but being a little bit of a mutt in some ways. But my culture and spirituality, has been a huge influence in my life growing up. So definitely something I always want to mention because it wouldn't be obvious to people. And so when I was 4, there was like a series of really traumatic events that happened within my family. So my younger brother, who was 18 months at the time, had a near-death experience. The paramedics told my parents had they gotten him to the hospital 10 minutes later, he wouldn't have made it. A week after that, my maternal grandmother passed very tragically. And then within that year, my paternal grandmother passed. So the 2 matriarchs of the family we lost in the same year. And so as you can imagine kind of how that like tailspins a family, right?
Well, especially in a Hispanic cultured family.
Oh my gosh.
That's the grandmas and moms.
They hold it down.
They're a big part
the
of
Mexican
the family.
moms hold it down.
Yeah.
Yes. And they were definitely the 2 of the matriarchs of the family. They were the people who kept the peace. They were the caretakers. They were the people who checked up on everyone. They were the nurturers. And I think it was really difficult for my parents to lose those mothers while they had such young children. And so a lot of mental health issues started happening in the family. So, my mom went into a deep depression. My dad was overwhelmed. They had 2 young kids. And I started getting really, really massive anxiety issues about age 4. So, we can look back now, I've looked at this with my therapist 1,000 times. Like, you can kind of tell there are pivotal points in your life where all of a sudden something shifts, but you can say like, oh my goodness, this makes sense. This was what this was about.
Yeah, mine was freshman year in high school.
Absolutely. All these like, you can like look at the time continuum and be like, yes, and that's what that's about. So I started having panic attacks really young. I started developing like really weird phobias, all around fear of death and dying. There was like some oversharing that happened in the family, so I knew way too much, way too young about how people die and what happens when people die and bodies of dead people, all that kind of stuff. And so by the time I was in elementary school, I had a pretty much diagnosed anxiety disorder, panic disorder, which just led me to not trust myself. I mean, I think really that's what it comes down to is, growing up with such a debilitating anxiety disorder, I just didn't trust myself. I struggled to trust other people. Trust was just a huge theme of life. I felt like my mind was always playing tricks on me. I didn't feel safe in my own body. I felt like I was afraid of everything. And so those were, and to be in elementary school going through that was really challenging.
Yeah, that would be a lot.
Yeah.
Because elementary school
it's already hard.
For normal kids, right?
And I was like, oh, look, I'm the psycho kid of our fourth grade. Those were really rough times. And my parents were like super hippie granolas. And so they didn't believe in medication. The thought of sending me to a doctor, to be put on medication was like, are you crazy? Also in the Hispanic culture, there's a little more secrecy around mental health issues.
I was going to say, we don't really talk about those kinds of things outside of, it's like,
and you don't
it's a huge secret. It's a secret.
Yes, and you don't seek help outside. It's one of those things like, no, we're just going to handle that in the family. And so, part of how it was going to get handled in the family was through a lot of praying to the Virgin Mary and just putting essential oils in your bath and, eating clean. Like that was how they were going to address my mental health issues. And so what happened is I just was not able to overcome them. So it just haunted me. And alcohol is a depressant, and anxiety disorder, people gravitate towards depressants for sure. So I remember the first time finding alcohol, I was 11 or 12, and I remember being like, holy shit, I can feel like I can be in my own body. I can be present in my own body. And that was kind of just where it all started for me, was searching for a way to not feel completely out of control in my own body all the time. And so then it's kind of interesting because throughout my adolescence, I didn't really struggle that much with anxiety, but I struggled severely with other issues related to the choices I was making around substances.
Did your family know you were drinking?
No, I was really
secretive.
Yeah, I was pretty well. But then, of course, there's a lot of alcoholic people in the family, and in my family in particular, everyone lived with us, and uncles lived with you, and cousins lived with you, and my grandfathers lived with us. So there were a lot of people to if something were discovered, there were just a lot of people to blame it on. It was just very confusing because everything was all jumbled together. So it was so easy to be like, that's not mine. There's 15 people living here. Why are you looking at me? That was my excuse for everything. And I was very high functioning. Looking back now, I didn't feel high functioning, but I was able to maintain good grades. I was a soccer player. I played many, many sports. Soccer was my favorite. So I was hitting all of those markers that parents expect their kids to hit in order to not address an issue. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So, even though I was having a lot of interpersonal conflict and issues with friends, and I, was depressed, and I didn't feel like myself, and I didn't trust myself, and I was kind of spinning out of control, I was still doing all the right things that kids are supposed to do to tell parents that they're okay. So the grades were fine and the sports were okay.
No, my parents had no idea because I was that good. I was that sweet, innocent.
Yeah.
My parents are never going to believe that I'm doing these kinds of things. So.
Yeah. And I think that was, that's the curse of being a high functioning alcoholic. I laugh sometimes. It's not funny, but it's one of those things it's so ridiculous it's funny. I remember when I got sober in my 20s, being really angry at God that he didn't make my path more messy, because then I would have gotten help sooner. That was one of the first things I had to let go of in my relationship with God, was the resentment I had. And I get teary even talking about it now. Why couldn't you have made it more obvious to people? Because here I am just flailing
Well, we have good enablers, right? Like,
Oh
I
my
tell
God,
people
yeah.
that sometimes. Like, I had some really great enablers that kept my addiction going for 20 years.
Absolutely.
They're just like, no, she's got it. Here, have some money. And I'm like,
let's throw some money at that. Yeah.
okay.
Let's throw some religion at that. Let's
Yeah.
throw some this, like, well-meaning.
Yeah.
Doing the best they can with what they
They
have.
just don't know. They just
Absolutely.
should have cut me off, like, a long time ago.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, the curse of the high-functioning alcoholic is, that we tend to, things go on longer, I think, because it's just so easy for people to say, but they're okay, but they have their jobs, they still have their kids, all of these things.
Yeah, the last time I went to rehab,
make.
I was working a full-time job and in school, taking care of both my kids, and my family was like, there's no way you need rehab. And I was like,
Look, I'm telling you, I'm about to lose my
I'm
mind.
like, no, I really need to go to rehab. Like, this is serious.
So, the interesting part, though, was as with a lot of people, there became a point where everything I was doing just wasn't sustainable anymore. And everything that had been working for a period of time stopped working. And so I either had to, massively up the ante or everything was crumbling. And so I was actually in graduate school to be a marriage and family therapist when I decided to get sober, which is hilarious. Of all the places to be when you decide to get sober, I would like to become a licensed mental health professional to help other people, yet I have this other side of me that's just boiling up to the surface. And so graduate school is part of what forced me to look at myself in ways that I did not want to look at myself before. I only wanted to look at the stuff that was shiny and pretty and that people would be proud of, but there was just this dark underbelly of my life that I was trying so hard to control and hold together, and it all just bubbled up to the surface in my early 20s. And so what happened to me was all of the things I was doing to manage it were not working. And so I sort of had a remake of what it was like as a young child. So the panic attacks all came back, and I was not able to drink them away. The phobias were all coming back. As a kid, I remember every time I would see an ambulance, and this is stuff that still strikes me, and I do still get triggered sometimes by loud sirens and stuff. Every time I would see an ambulance, I would immediately think someone I love is in there and they're dying. So, I would my mom would say, well, then do the sign of the cross. And so we'd all be in the car doing the sign of the cross. But it wasn't I pray for whoever's in there. It was completely based in fear and terror. And then I would have tummy issues and massive anxiety until I saw or heard from all the people in my family that were not in that ambulance. Because I remember being what if my dad's in that ambulance? Because he's not with me right now. These are little burdens for children. Can you imagine, just
Well,
trying
you live
to...
in a city that there's a lot of ambulances,
Yes!
too. This isn't
Can you imagine just trying to drive to the playground or something, and every time you see an ambulance, you're literally terrified from the inside that your father is in that ambulance. It's just kind of how mental health was landing on me at the time. And then I remember hearing about some kid who was talking on the phone and choked to death on a Cheeto. He was laughing and he choked on a Cheeto. And I remember being well, then I could choke to death. So then I would chew my food 300 times before I would swallow it. Just these bizarre little phobias and habits that end up happening. And so all of that kind of came back when the alcohol and the drugs just stopped working for me. And then, so here I am in my 20s left with, picking up on my mental health issue right where I left off in elementary school. And I was at a bachelorette party. And I had 5 or 6 Everclear margaritas and kind of just went out into a spiral. And that was the last time I ever drank. And I went into one of the biggest panic attacks I'd ever had. And I remember saying, I'm either going to hurt myself, I'm either going to need to be locked away long-term in a hospital, or I need to get well. And so thank God I chose to get well. So, and I did that through the 12-step community. I did that through a therapist that I started seeing, who to this day is just nothing but an angel in my life.
So did you go to treatment? Did you need to go to treatment?
No.
Or just meetings and then
Yes, and really, really, really intense counseling. You know, and I think one of the...
Kudos to you. I always have big respect for those people that can just like go to meetings and like stop. 'Cause I'm like,
well, you know, of course,
I had to be like locked up for a whole minute.
well, and then I remember like feeling like I didn't have the resources to do it, and I'm like, how come all these other people like get to go and be taken care of? That's how I at least imagined it. I know that's not everyone's experience of residential treatment, but I remember being like, I wish that I could go somewhere and feel taken care of, and just kind of like not have to deal with whatever this is for just a second. But I was blessed with a really incredible counselor. And what I know to this day, and this is part of what I bring into the work that I do at Archway, what I know to this day is, had someone not dug all the way deep, deep down into my mental health issues, there's no way in hell I would have remained sober.
So that's a big thing when I'm working with women. Like I love AA, I love all 12-step programs, but I think it's sometimes if there's trauma,
Yep.
like you need to go see a therapist.
Absolutely.
I saw one this last time when I finally got sober. So I think it's really important.
I agree.
Because
I agree. And there are so many different kinds of trauma too.
there is, and I had an outpatient. I did outpatient at Santa Maria one time, and she was like, "You will never achieve long-term sobriety until you get your mental health stuff taken care of." I was like, "What? No, I can just go to like AA meetings." She was like, "Yeah, how's that been working for the last 18 years?"
Yeah. Well, and this is what I knew about myself is once I stopped putting alcohol and drugs in my body, and then I was just left with me, completely unmedicated, unfiltered.
You still have all that stuff.
Oh my God. Well, and that was the stuff that I'm honestly the most terrified of.
Yeah.
Like, yes, did I make really poor choices under the influence? Did I create more trauma for myself? Did I create mayhem and wreak havoc in my life and the lives of other people while under the influence? And did I have to clean all that up? Yes. But when you take all of that stuff away from me and I'm left with just what's inside me, the way I feel about myself, what I'm terrified of, the lack of trust that I had in my own decision making, I mean, that's what I was left. And that was the stuff that was truly terrifying. And I knew, okay, if I just don't put drugs and alcohol in my body anymore, but I don't figure out all this kind of stuff, I mean, I could easily turn into someone who's a hoarder or a shopaholic or a sex addict or like, there would just be another thing I would pick, right? Like another hamster wheel that I would get on attempting to run away from all of this stuff that's inside of me. So, and you know, still to this day, I mean, I'll be totally honest, with 18 years sober, I mean, it is a daily, it's daily work for me to manage my anxiety issues. You know, sometimes it's just low-grade anxiety. COVID has stirred all that shit up for me. You know, just being isolated, having to figure out a new way to do life, not having the same structure and routine, you know, being nervous about health concerns, being terrified for my parents who were older. You know, that brought up a whole new wave of like, I have got to address this stuff. I've got to get myself grounded. I have to get myself centered. I've got to be like the most spiritually fit of my life in order to walk through all this.
What recommendations do you have for people that like do have to isolate right now? Like I've been working from home for the last 2 weeks, and I feel like I'm about to lose my mind.
Yeah.
Like that's what I was talking to Suzanne about yesterday because we were on the phone, and she was like, "Well, just come back to the office Monday," and I was like, "I'm gonna kill someone if I don't get out of like get to see people soon." Like I'm not one of those that can work from home.
So I'm not either, and let me just tell you, it's been a massive struggle. So you know, I like to complain all the time about how I put on some weight, like, you know, I'm feeling chunky, but I don't do anything about it. I just complain about it, right? I mean, you know how that goes sometimes. Just like what's something that I know I need to change and I'm not ready to change, so I'll just complain about it obsessively. But this whole thing has forced me to start walking. I like who goes walking? Like that's like some geriatric shit. Like I don't know who.
Daniel tries to get me to go walking all the time. I'm like, why? I'm like, I don't want to work all day. Then go like, for a walk in my neighborhood.
Like, oops. So I've been walking like 3 times a day. I don't go. I mean, I'm not you know a marathon walker or anything like that. But you know, even it's just to get myself like different scenery, something else physically active, so I'm not just sitting in a chair. I wish that I had like a perfect solution for isolation, but I think for every person it's different. Yeah. And for me, it's been a cluster of.
Well, this is a weird time for people that, I mean, I feel lucky because I have good sobriety time, so it's not, I haven't like
Can you
freaked out
imagine
not
what it would
going
be
to a
like to
meeting,
be
but
under a
that's the
year
thing,
sober?
like, I don't know how people that only have like a couple days, or they're finally like making the decision to get sober, are able to do this via Zoom meetings. Like,
Yeah.
that's crazy to me.
Because the fellowship and the chemistry and everything
See,
is
and that's what I
different.
love. I love getting to like go and see people and visit, sometimes more than I actually like sitting in a meeting, right? Which
Absolutely.
meetings are good, but sometimes
Sometimes
I
it's
really
the
just,
coffee afterwards,
I
like,
really
where
like
the
the
magic
fellowship.
happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know how people do it. Kudos to those.
Well,
that
I think
are.
most people are struggling to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, just
But I will say this, I mean, I think there have been a lot of blessings, you know, like I always try to be like, okay, what's the silver lining in this? You know, there have also been a ton of blessings. I'm reading books that I've like bought years ago that I was like, oh my God, I really want to read this. You know, someone's like, this book changed my life. So I order it and then it just sits there, you know, because I work full time and I've got a teenager. And like, you know, it's easier for me to be like, I'd rather watch The Real Housewives of Atlanta than read this book on spirituality. You know, so I've read like 15 books since March, and I'm not a reader. Like it doesn't light me up inside to like curl up with a book. And of course, they're all self-help books. Like none of them are for entertainment. I'm like, how can I grow? Please help me grow. That's been a game changer for me in terms of like how do I find peace with this, and you know, how do I keep myself centered. And I know this sounds really silly, but I try to think of like one thing to do every single day that I can look forward to, even if it's like, today I'm gonna put gas in my car and go to the self-vacuuming place. Like, how sad that that's like my activity for the day. But I think in this time and space, like we just have to have things to look forward to. My son and I decided every time we would walk by like our family calendar and there's nothing on it, literally there's nothing on the calendar. I mean, we've got some soccer practices and stuff like that. But you know, normally our calendar is overflowing with stuff, which I get resentful about sometimes. But to walk by it and just it's a ghost. We just decided we need to start putting those activities on the calendar. Like it's the ritual of like having something that we're gonna do that we're gonna look forward to, even if it's like this thing we're gonna cook that we've never cooked before. Like we're making Mongolian beef tonight.
Okay,
like
so
never in a million years.
I'll come to your house.
But like never, I don't cook. Like I really like to eat out, you know, preferably fast food, which is why I got some junk in the trunk. But like I'm trying to get excited about cooking, and we're trying, you know, I'm getting excited about home projects, like anything that I can do.
So Pinterest is your new friend. Are you on Pinterest?
Pinterest is actually the devil to me, because I could like just fall into that black hole for forever. That and social media, I do not do well with. So yeah, but exactly. Yeah. Any home projects, you know, all these things I've wanted to do that I never have time to do. Kind of feels good to be able to check those things.
Yeah,
off
it does.
the list
So I
right
saw
now.
this. You brought up calendars. I saw this funny meme on Facebook, and it was like, the biggest waste of money in 2019 was a 2020 planner, right? Because there's
So
like,
true.
and I was
Like,
like,
nothing
oh,
going on.
that's true. I didn't actually buy one of those this year.
Nothing going on. Well, and you know, so I'm the executive director of Archway Academy, which is a recovery high school, and so to attempt to do school in the midst of a pandemic we literally on a Thursday we were in the classroom, Friday we were not, and we kept thinking we're about to be back.
What was that like, right? Because it was
crazy.
The end of last year, right? It was like in March or something, right? That's when.
For us, it was 2 days before our spring break.
Okay. So what did that look like?
It looked like
Has that been hard for the
It's been hard for everybody. Yeah.
Because
it's been hard for the students, it's been hard for their families, it's been hard for the staff, it's been hard for the staff families. I mean, none of us knew what we were doing. We had to turn and pivot on a dime and figure out how do we deliver, 40 hours a week of school and recovery support services to people when none of us are supposed to be leaving our houses, because that was when there was that the Harris County stay-at-home order. So we were trying to transition everything into online, and then half of my teachers were like, how do you log into Zoom? I mean, it was just like there was a technology curve that we were dealing with, and it was just really, really different. I'm proud of how the Archway kids handle things. I mean, I feel like this is literally one of the strangest times in my lifetime that I've ever had to navigate, and I'm a 42-year-old woman with 18 years sober. I cannot imagine what it's like to be 16 or 18 with under a year sober while still in high school, dealing with all the uncertainty that's coming with this pandemic, and parents losing jobs,
Yeah.
and then being home with your family that you may or may not be in massive conflict with.
Yeah. So what is Archway for people that don't know? Because I had never heard about this until like a year and a half ago. I was taking a recovery coach class with Dorothy and Dylan West, and they started talking about recovery high schools, and I was like, what the hell is a recovery high school?
What would that be?
I was like, boy, like that, totally, I'd never heard of it.
Yeah. So we're a private-public partnership organization. So Archway is the private nonprofit organization, and then we partner with a public charter school.
Okay.
And so it is a high school for kids who have had drug and alcohol issues and co-occurring mental health issues. So every student at Archway is there because they're dedicated to finishing their high school diploma while being in a program that nurtures and appreciates and respects their mental health challenges and their journey of recovery. So we've got, academic classes. So, they're taking all the classes they would be taking in traditional schools, and they do state testing, and we offer special ed services. Everything that kids could get in traditional public schools, they can get on our campus. It's just very, very small and very intimate. And then we've got licensed professional counselors, licensed marriage and family therapists, and recovery coaches on campus all day for the kids to help them figure out, this is what I tell the kids. We're going to help you figure out how to work a program at school, like in your everyday life, with teachers and personalities and pre-cal and chemistry and, friends and relationship drama and us forcing you to do things you don't want to do and having to get up on time and all that kind of stuff. Like, we're trying to figure out not only like how do you not put drugs and alcohol in your body, but then how do you show up as the person that you're meant to be in your everyday life. Because, school's kind of their full-time job.
Yeah.
So, how do you show up in your job in a way that where you have integrity?
Do you guys run on an honor code system, or do you do like weekly? Is there drug testing?
We do drug testing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I love the honor code.
I was just wondering how that works.
And we do drug testing.
Just trusting them. They're sober.
No, we do drug testing, but I will say this: a lot of my expectation for kids is not that they always be perfect, but that they be honest. I mean, I believe that when you're honest about your behavior and what you're doing, even when you mess up, that you're still working a program if you're honest about what's going on with you. And so, our expectation is that if the kids are struggling with their recovery, that they come forward about it. Because, there is a difference between coming forward and being caught, big time.
Like, so it's good to tell on yourself, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And telling on yourself is part of you showing that you're, that you have willingness to work a recovery program.
And you guys have really good statistics for kids that graduate and go to college, too.
Yeah, absolutely. So typically about 94% of the kids who graduate from Archway go on to either a community college or a four-year college. And then we have a lot of kids who look into VOTEC programs like plumbing or to be an electrician, or some of our kids have gone into the military. But our hope is that every kid who graduates has a pretty solid plan for life after high school. Otherwise, they just kind of fall into this like big empty void of possibilities, and so it's nice for them to kind of have a clear path or understanding of what they want to do when they leave.
Are the parents involved a lot? Like, are you like forcing the families to get involved and be like?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, much like with everything, like there's that full spectrum of parent engagement. So we've got some parents that are so engaged that's
too much, probably.
That we're like, hey, we need to teach you. Like, we need to teach you about boundaries. We need to teach you about appropriately separating from your child, letting your child take ownership and responsibility for themselves. Like, when your child is 17 and you wake them up in the morning by rubbing their hair and then have their meal provided. I mean, like, we're going to need for you to back up the helicopter parenting so your child can take more ownership of their own life. And no, you don't need to call me 10 times a day to ask me questions that your child could easily be asking me.
Yeah.
Let's help them have their own voices. And then we have parents who just disappeared as parents. And so we're trying to pull them into, like, please engage with us. We need your help and support with accountability at home. We need you to create some structure for your child. So it's kind of the full
Well, and I think it's good to educate parents, right? Because I think not all parents really maybe understand addiction, right? Especially if it's, like, skipped them and they weren't addicts.
Or they are addicts and they're in the midst of their own addiction.
Yes, or they're very in denial that they're have a problem.
Yeah. I mean, it's very fascinating to me how many families identify that their kid has a problem and their kid's behavior is like obnoxious and they're sassy and they're, aggressive at home, and so they force their kids into these programs, yet the parents' behavior completely mirrors the kid's behavior. But the parents, just want to put all the attention on the kid and not really look in the mirror at all. So we tend to be a part of, in our own some subtle and sometimes not so subtle ways, like helping parents to see if the whole family unit does not begin to shift, we're going to just see the same problems over and over again.
And then what do you know about, because I just learned about these two, there's sober colleges now?
Yeah.
That's a thing too?
Yes, collegiate recovery programs.
What does that look like?
Oh, it's freaking amazing.
I need to
oh
go
my God,
tour
it's
one of
amazing.
those.
So Texas actually has quite a few. So U of H has one.
Okay.
John Shiflett runs that program. UT Austin, well, actually all the UT campuses have them. And Texas Tech in Lubbock has one of the longest standing collegiate recovery programs. They've been around for like almost 30 years doing collegiate recovery work. So the whole college is not sober. Like with recovery high schools, the whole high school is a recovery program. But like if you take U of H's program, Cougars in Recovery, U of H is a large university, and then it's sort of like a small program within the university. But it's very similar to kind of how Archway is, which is, we want you to be dedicated towards your higher education, and then also have a community within that larger group that knows you, nurtures you, provides support for you so that you can reach your collegiate goals while having recovery support. So, and it's not a substitute for community-based recovery. It's just a community of people that are all doing the same thing. Like they're all in college, navigating the challenges of being a college student, living on campus, stuff like that. And so it's like a smaller community within the larger recovery community that really understands the unique needs of being a college student trying to get sober or trying to stay sober.
That's pretty awesome.
They're super cool programs.
Yeah, that's neat. So do most kids at Archway still live at home? Because I know Garen, when we had Garen on, he was actually a TRT and coming to Archway.
Absolutely.
So
I would say probably 90%.
Still live at
90% live either with their parents or with someone in the family. Maybe like grandparents or aunts and uncles. And then we do have a lot of kids that have lived in sober living while attending school. And then right now we have a lot of young men who are in like a CPS group home. So they live like in a transition, well, it's not really transitional living. It's like a legit CPS residential facility where all their basic needs are taken care of, and then we provide their education. So those kids do not live at home with their parents. Many of them, the parental rights have been terminated, and the kids are just trying to survive until they age out of CPS. So, yeah.
So what does the process look like? So say someone is like, okay, I'm going to send my kid to Archway. Even, what if the kid doesn't want to go? Is that a thing? Like they're kicking and screaming and you're like, no, I'm not doing this?
Yes, it's totally a thing.
What does that process look like?
So I tell families, the kid has to have some basic willingness to come. Like, we're not a force your kid program. We're not a court ordered, I don't want to be here, but I'm just going to do this for probation kind of program. But your kid also doesn't have to be like turning cartwheels and, blowing smoke up my ass to come.
Ooh, I'm going to be sober forever. Yeah.
So, and the truth is, for young people, and this is not for all young people, but for a lot of young people, the family has hit rock bottom, but the young person has not. So, when you're an adolescent getting sober, a lot of times your parents are pretty much forcing you to get into recovery versus the adult population where people, for the most part, are kind of choosing it more for themselves. And so, when you're an adolescent, your parents can put you into residential treatment without your permission. Mm-hmm. As an adult, unless you have a mental health warrant, you can't be forced to get help for yourself. So there is a little bit of difference between the adolescent population and the adult population. But for Archway, we need kids to have some basic desire to come to the school and try this, and like a good attitude and a willingness to give it a shot. Some kids have very little time sober. Some kids are coming to us straight from a psychiatric hospital, straight from residential treatment. Maybe they said all the right things in treatment, but we don't know how they're gonna be once they're out of a lockdown residential treatment center that they didn't agree to go to in the first place. So, a lot of it's kind of trial and error. And I tell parents it's their job to just try to get the kid to a tour with us. And then it's my job to help the kid to see how this could really benefit their life and kind of talk them into, in some ways, trying us. to see if we can make a difference.
So do parents just,
They just call
they
me.
call you?
Yeah.
Go on the website,
Our website's
right?
awesome, which
It
is
is, actually. I looked at it.
archwayacademy.org.
It's pretty
There's some
good.
like really cool videos on there, and all of our contact information is there. But really, it kind of starts with me. So I normally set up the tours and student interviews. I like to interview and tour the entire family. That way, everyone kind of understands how we are the same as traditional schools and how we're different. And so it kind of just starts with that tour where I can learn a little more about each kid and what they need from us, and if we can meet their needs, and how willing are they to try.
So there is an interview process?
Yeah.
Is there any sort of like private school special testing that takes
No.
place? It's just the interview.
It's really just me vibing. Like, or is this gonna work for you? Yeah, but it's not traditional like diagnostic testing or anything like that. And then when families fill out the enrollment packet, there's kind of an intense psychosocial history form, because we just want to know what kind of trauma has this young person experienced, what kind of death and loss or grief have they experienced, how are they with friends, what's going on with their sexuality. I mean, like a lot of questions that we want to know so that we can make sure we provide the right supports for them while they're on campus with us.
Is any time too late to start? Like,
No. That's one of the beautiful parts of
I mean,
being a
I have a
recovery
senior.
school.
God, I'd love for him to go
Yeah.
here, right? Like,
Well,
is it
so
like,
there's
it's
no
too late,
there's
you
no
wanna
right
go?
year to start,
Okay.
and there's no right time of the year to start. So I remember talking to a mom, and she was like, "Well, it's October, and I guess you guys don't open up enrollment again until the new semester." And I was like, "Oh, bless your heart." Like, hey, there's a tiny little window of opportunity. Like the door is just cracked, and that's all we have. And so it doesn't matter what time of the school year it is. If all of a sudden you have a willingness to try recovery, Archway will be an option for your family. And it doesn't matter if it's one day before spring break, or 6 weeks into the semester, or right before Thanksgiving. If you want to come and try a recovery high school and devote your life to some recovery practices to see if we can help you be the person you're meant to be, then the timing is really more up to God and not up to us, and we're just available 24/7 to help families navigate it.
So it's curriculum, the recovery coaches, but then there's also some after school stuff, right?
Yeah, so we partner
Classes and stuff.
with a lot of the local alternative peer groups, which are
Okay.
kind of like youth recovery groups. And so most of the kids at Archway also participate in one of those groups. It's kind of like the youth version of the 12-step fellowship. And the youth version tends to have more supervision and much more parent support to it than traditional 12-step groups do. And so most of our kids participate in those activities. So they have a place to go after school, and they have social things to do on the weekends. So they're not like just chilling watching Matlock with their grandparents on Friday night because they can't hang out with anybody because
Right.
they have to let go of all their old friends. So yeah, that's kind of the magic of Archway, is kind of the balance of newer kids that are trying to find themselves in recovery, and the older kids, not necessarily chronologically older, but like maybe just older in their recovery, that are there to kind of pair up. So, every single staff person that works on the Archway Academy side of the school, all of us are in recovery.
Okay.
Not all of our teachers are. Well, many of our teachers are, but not all of them. And so our goal is just to give kids the opportunity to be around people who live this lifestyle. And our hope is that it rubs off, that young people see me and my recovery coaches and other kids in the school with a year sober or 2 years sober, and they begin to see like, wow, like maybe I'd like that for myself.
Well, and I think maybe some young people don't really think that young people can be sober.
Oh, for
so
sure.
Aiden, that's how Aiden moved in with me at Christmas. He's 17 now. He has some substance abuse issues, and it was real bad with his grandma. So I was like, look, when you come, like, you have to be sober, and you have to go to meetings, and you have to do all this, right? And so I started taking him to the young people's meeting up at Post Oak, and he was just like,
What is this?
all these people are sober? And I'm like, yes, they're sober. And he's like, no, like, they're really sober. And I'm like, yes, they're really sober. They don't do anything. He's like, they don't even like smoke pot. And I'm like, no, they don't do anything. I'm like, all these people are so, like,
It's hard to imagine.
He cannot, like, really, I
Yeah.
don't think, still wrap his brain around the fact that young people can be sober, even from marijuana.
I think a lot of people.
Because then I have the debate with him, right?
Yeah. That's
Well, what if it was legalized? Like, they're still gonna stay sober? And I'm like, okay, well, alcohol's legal and I don't drink. And I was like, they could legalize pot tomorrow.
Think of all the prescription
And I was
medication
like,
that's
I will
legal.
still not be able to smoke marijuana. And I'm like, so it doesn't, and he just really, he's like, it's hard for him.
I think it's really hard for young people to imagine being able to have fun without substances, because so much of our culture, the young people's culture, is centered around a lot of that, even in their music and
Oh, for sure,
what people are
music.
posting on social media and stuff. I mean, it's hard for them to. I think that their perception is that life would just be really boring and empty if they
And
didn't
having to
have
do
the
it
chance
forever,
party.
right? Because I think that's where Aiden's mind goes, is he's like, well, what's the point? Because when I don't live with you, I'm probably gonna smoke pot anyways, so like, why? And I'm like, just stop eating edibles. Like, just, please stop. Please.
And I don't think that young people always can recognize, because I think families do such a good job of secret keeping, they don't even realize what their predisposition is. Like, I know for me, I didn't understand how rampant that alcoholism was on both sides of my family and how many mental health issues were on both sides of my family. And so I didn't even know what to watch out for. It's like there are all these buried landmines everywhere that, like, if families were a bit more honest, or if families were a bit more accountable. I mean, that's probably the better word. If we were a bit more accountable for what was going on with us.
Do you think a family can be too honest, though?
I think that parents can
you know what I mean?
overshare.
Because,
For
like,
sure. Yeah.
I was incarcerated for a little bit, and so Aiden lived with his grandma, so, I mean, he knew all kinds of stuff that I was doing. Then I'm just like, wow, wish they wouldn't have told me that. You know what I mean? Because I think he's like, well, I'm not doing that, right? Like, I'm not doing the things you were doing. It's just pot, so, like, it's okay. And I'm like, okay, before anything else, I was a pothead. Like, that's all I did.
Yeah.
That's all I did was smoke weed.
Have you seen, so there was like an ESPN thing on Chris Herron, the famous basketball player. So, if any of your viewers have a chance to watch it, he's actually done 2 documentary shows on ESPN, but the one that he did more recently was about, instead of, when we think of like an alcoholic or a drug addict, we tend to kind of imagine the picture of what they looked like at the worst point. Right, like all cracked out with like meth sores on your face,
Like homeless, right? Like living under a bridge and stuff,
looking shabby, and you have no money, and it's hard for us to imagine. Like, it's easy to be like, well, I would never get to that point. But what he talks about is like, but what was it like the first time? Like when you open the floodgates, no one talks about the first time that you drank, right? No one talks about the first time that you got arrested. Sometimes all we do is we talk about what it looks like when addiction is at its worst point, when we're the farthest on the continuum, when people die or overdose, or, all the images that are out there in the media of the parents who shot up something and passed out in their car with their toddler in the car seat in the back. Like, those are the media images that people have of someone who has a problem. So then when you're a parent and you drink a bottle of Prosecco a day to numb out the stress of your job, like, that's not the picture of what an alcoholic looks like, but that's some seriously alcoholic drinking.
Yeah.
And so I think what happens is, sometimes there aren't a lot of honest conversations happening about all the things that lead up to the ugliest picture of addiction, because all of those behaviors, like, all of those there are opportunities to stop it where it is. Like, I personally am grateful that I was a high bottom person, right? I mean, I didn't get into legal trouble, although I should have. I didn't have a lot of those, but I didn't have a lot of those consequences, and I can look back and just be grateful, that living with an active anxiety disorder was enough for me. Messing up some friendships and relationships for sure, creating havoc, distrusting myself, all of those things. I had a lot of consequences to my addiction, but I didn't have a lot of legal consequences. I didn't have children. I didn't lose custody of my kids. I wasn't fired from jobs due to that. I think sometimes people are like, well, all those things need to happen before someone should seek help.
See, and that's how I think I was when I was a young person, right? Because my mom, I was in my first rehab at like 14. Like, when Laha had a young adults program, and I was like,
Laha, yes, back in the
I was
day.
like, what are you, like, I don't wake up drinking. right? Like, all I'm doing is
I don't drink every
smoking
day.
pot, right? Like, this is what high school kids do. And then, like, over the years, like, when I was, like, going to meetings, it was that same thing, though. It was, okay, well, I don't wake up drinking, like, I don't have the shakes, like, I'm not doing this every day, like, I'm not homeless, like, all these things. I hear, you know, people sharing, like, what their bottom was. And I was like, oh, well,
I
none
personally,
of that's happened, so I'm okay.
I love the mix of what happens when I go to meetings, and I do think there's a slippery slope sometimes that happens, and I'm not singling out the 12-step community because those are my people, and that's how I got well. But I think in all communities where people gather to kind of like commiserate or share about common goal, about common issues, I think sometimes what happens, and I hear this with young people constantly, is that they begin to exaggerate their own use to feel more a part of, because a lot of people who come in have hardcore stories and they have high bottoms, and so you start to kind of decorate your story a little bit in order to feel more a part of, which is what we're all searching for.
You've earned a spot in this club, right?
Yes.
Like,
But then
I deserve to be here because I've had this.
But then what happens is a new person comes in who's also at a high bottom, and thank God for high bottoms, who can't relate to anyone because everyone's had
That's how, for a
these low
long time, I was just like,
yeah.
none of these things
So
apply to me.
I choose to try to keep it real and tell people that I was pretty much a straight up alcoholic. Drugs were a very small part of my story. I was pretty high functioning. I got well due more to my mental health issues. I didn't have, massive consequences, and really outside of my own physical consequences and family consequences. And I'm grateful that I found recovery early. I was young when I found it, and I did not completely destroy my life or my family. And that's a recovery story. Just like being homeless and being incarcerated. I mean, all of these stories are important and meaningful, and all of these stories are part of what led us all to the same thing, which is an abstinence-based life with spiritual foundations to it, where we're all trying to do our best.
I love it. So y'all can't see her because she's off camera, but Becca is back up here today. She is an Archway graduate, right? Yes. So do we want to put her on the hot? Do you have questions for Sasha? This is like the one time you get to question the principal, basically, right?
She has questioned me so many times.
I don't think I do. I'm just grateful to be here.
Yeah.
It's you, like, literally, you're my sunshine today. It's just raining outside.
Nice
When I was
surprise,
coming
right?
up the stairs and Daniel told me that Becca was here, I was like, a little God moment. Like, I just warmth came over me just being able to see your face.
So what did Archway do for you, Becca? Like, where do you think you'd be if you hadn't got to go to Archway?
I think I'd probably be dead. Because I stopped so soon, my disease didn't get a chance to progress, and like for an alcoholic like me, it's either jails, institutions, or death.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I would be in one of those places, and I didn't stay sober after Archway, but they taught me that I knew a place where to go. I knew where to go after it got bad again, and
It's that cliche kind of saying, right? Like AA will mess up your drinking.
Yes. Oh,
Right? Like,
my
if you
favorite,
relapse,
that's my
you're always
favorite
going to
part of
have all
recovery.
this, like, recovery knowledge in your head.
Because now you know more.
Yeah. It's like,
So-
great.
yeah, and they like taught me what I want in life, and like they like showed me how to be like a good friend, a good mother, a good daughter. Like they just taught me how to be good people, and how to, and like now I want to be what they are, like when I grow up. I'm 20, but I want to go back to school and become like a therapist or a LCDC or something along that lines. And so like they like showed me that, you know what I mean?
I think Becca should be a recovery coach at
Oh,
Archway.
hell yeah. My favorite people to hire are my alumni.
Same.
You know that.
I'm planning on taking the test in December,
Love
the
it.
recovery coach test.
Love it.
Yeah.
Because that's when I have 2 years, and that's, I
Yeah.
think that's,
Roughly. Yep.
yeah.
It's going to be awesome.
I agree.
So, anything else you want to share with us? I don't even know, like, where we're at. We've just been...
Y'all just been gone.
going. I love it.
And I just, I love any opportunity I get to, I know most of the people who are going to be watching this are people who are likely already dedicated to recovery, and so, any opportunity that I get to like remind people who are maybe 2 years in or 3 years in, or maybe have some good time sober, and COVID-19 has like become the major hurdle or challenge to like, do I stay sober or do I not stay sober? That, that there have been many points in my life. I actually got divorced a couple of years ago, and it was after being married for 20 years, and it was really, really difficult. And so, there have been those little milestones every now and then, or those things that happen where I have that honest sit down with myself again. Like, can I survive this?
Well, because life
with
happens.
no substances.
I think people forget sometimes, like, just because we get sober doesn't mean, like, you're going to be on this wonderful pink cloud forever and everything's like, but we don't have rainbows, right? Like,
so true. Hard life happens.
Stuff still happens
Absolutely.
when you get sober, and now you don't have that
that
initial,
buffer.
like,
Yep.
okay, well, I'll just go do this so I feel better, right? But my car's still going to be broke down in my driveway when I come down, so, like.
Absolutely. And
You know what I
life
mean?
is still going to be hard, and I'm going to have to deal with financial issues, or I'm going to have to deal with the death of a parent, or I'm going to have to, there's just a lot that happens in life. And yeah, recovery doesn't guarantee an easy path. It just guarantees a different path. And, for anyone who is kind of questioning right now, is this worth it? All of this that I'm doing, like how hard I'm working to maintain recovery, is it worth it? It's absolutely, totally worth it.
Yeah, that's what I tell people. I'm like, because I'll have 3 years in November, and I tell people all the time, I'm like, which to me that doesn't seem like a lot, right? Like, people are like,
Oh my God, it's forever.
congratulations.
It's
And
forever.
I'm like, compared to like how long I was using for, like, 3 years really isn't that long. But like, I really try to tell, I would not trade my absolute worst, locked keys in the car, ran over your dog, just terrible day sober for like my best, most fun day using. Like, real talk. Because at the beginning it was fun, right? Like, all my using wasn't always terrible. But I would not trade
No.
for anything.
No.
I think that's why I get frustrated with newcomers. I'm like, just do it.
Just try.
Please, just do it. Like, I wish, like, someone would have sat me down, like, 20 years ago and been like, seriously, just, like, get it together and, like,
Yeah.
here's some consequences, like, just do this thing.
Yes. I literally had one of the more cathartic conversations with a close friend, like maybe in April, where we were both just talking about how difficult, this time is, and all the uncertainty and people being laid off, and, financial insecurity and just fear, and, are we watching the news too much? Are we not informed? And just kind of just talking through everything that's going on right now with the pandemic. And, I was telling her, I was like, I just don't feel like myself, but I don't know why I don't feel like myself. Do I not feel like myself because of everything that's happening? Because I'm isolated, because I'm not going up to the office every day, because I'm here with my son 24/7, which we're kind of not used to. Should I just be grateful for the time, but I like really want to, punch him in the teeth right now. Why do I not feel like myself? And what it got down to is that this was another opportunity for me to dive deep again into working the 12 steps. And like, am I spiritually fit? What connection do I have with God? How much energy am I putting into that? Because what I realized is these last couple of years, I've been kind of just staying high off of the fellowship and staying high off my personal relationships.
And being busy, right? 'Cause
Yes,
you're just, like,
and doing my good sober life, that I feel proud of. And it's been a couple of years since I've like really sat down with myself again and been like, girl, where are you at? What are you avoiding? And so this has been the opportunity to do that. But in some ways I feel like COVID gave me that blessing again, because I could have probably drawn that out for another year or two. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, well, I just finished the steps. And so, I don't always go right into working the steps again. Sometimes I'll like just coast.
Yeah.
For a little while, like, oh, look at me, I've got so much awareness, and I just like try to live off of that for a while until I start to not feel like myself.
Or I work in recovery, so
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm helping
All
people
day, every
all
day I've been
so.
in meetings. I don't need to go to another meeting for myself, Yeah, no, the lie we tell ourselves. We work in the recovery community for sure.
No,
So, yeah.
and I think people forget that just because you work in recovery does not substitute like you going and sitting in a meeting for you. Not because you took people to the meeting, or like you also need to take time and do things for you in your recovery.
And not only do people who work in the
Because we're all
recovery
addicts
field,
too, usually,
oh my
right?
God,
We're all
yes.
addicts too and like hot messes. So it's like
I feel like the people who work in the recovery community have more of a responsibility to like get a little crazy with how militant they are with their recovery program, because we also are giving and draining and loving and but here's the other one that people really hate to hear is like how important it is for us to be an Al-Anon. And I resisted, I did. Oh, I resisted that for years, but I mean, who is Al-Anon for? Al-Anon is for people who love and are in close relationships with people who are alcoholics. And working in the recovery field puts you in more of an Al-Anon type relationship with people who do not always follow your recommendations and don't always stay sober.
And I forget to do it. It's been suggested to me, and
well, then it was meant to come up today in this conversation.
I've done CODA, and I've done ACA, and I have
CODA.
avoided, and I really probably
But
should
there's
go to
something
Al-Anon.
really magical about working Al-Anon steps as a professional person because of just how easy it is for us to become enmeshed and how, I'll be really honest, there have been a lot of young people that I have met and created a relationship with through Archway that we've lost. Many that we have lost. And, going to those funerals, being asked to speak at those funerals, being expected to really support those parents. I mean, that takes a freaking massive spiritual toll on me. And, Al-Anon, a lot of the Al-Anon steps and a lot of the tools there, are to help me not be so depleted by it that I become resentful of the industry. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
we were at one, last week or the week before, and I left there like just really angry. And I was like, I'm just...
Yeah. So what do we do as professionals?
Right now?
What do we do as professionals to take care of ourselves in this time so that we can continue pouring our heart into, this field that we love so much, that we're so personally connected to, I mean, I think of people who have lost a parent or lost someone in hospice and become a hospice worker. Like, they are the most incredible hospice workers, but they also have the most work they probably need to do to keep their stuff separated from other people's stuff. And so it's just a metaphor for us too. But I could not imagine like working outside of this field right now. I mean, this is my heart and my soul, and Archway is like literally the love of my life. And
you've been at
outside of my
Archway
own
for how
family
long?
for 12 years.
Yeah.
Outside of my own, family, outside of my son and my immediate family. I mean, this is what I choose to pour myself into because I love these kids so much and I love their families and I want people to have the opportunity to get sober. I think everyone deserves it.
Definitely. This was great. Okay, any shout outs you want to give to anyone? Anything else you want to? I always let people, and it's so funny because they'll forget or they'll be like, no, and then they'll message me later and be like,
I should
have said something about my mom or something, right?
Well, shout out to my 13-year-old son and
don't burn the house
and
down.
my nephew who are home alone right now while I'm doing this. Well, and just a shout out to every family that's ever been a part of the Archway family. Whether they're struggling right now or in a really great place because of Archway and the recovery community. They're just a part of who I am, and I can't imagine life without them.
Well, and you guys, we talked earlier, you have a good game plan for the beginning of school, so you guys still are accepting?
Yes, absolutely. We're accepting new students for the upcoming 2020-2021 school year, and we're going to do kind of a hybrid program where we're going to follow HISD's recommendations to do some virtual schooling through the first 6 weeks, but we will allow kids to come on campus if they don't have appropriate supervision or their mental health or their recovery is really being negatively impacted by being at home. So, it'll kind of be both. Either families can choose to do the first 6 weeks at home, or the kids can come up on campus and be under the supervision of the recovery coaches.
That's awesome.
So I think it'll be pretty cool.
I'll just drop mine off anyways. Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is really great. I'm going to make sure that the website link and everything for Archway you'll be able to find in the comments or on the Facebook and YouTube page. So check that out, and then make sure you like and share us, because we're on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, iTunes, Spotify, and for Android users, Google Podcasts. And then, so I want to give a shout out to, real quick, to Transformations for letting me use the building. And something new that we're going to try to support small businesses or local businesses. If you like the t-shirt that I have on, you can go to Facebook. It's called Walking on Sunshine Trinkets and Treasures. It's just really cool. This lady makes all these t-shirts. Shipping super cheap. And there's some of them that are really hilarious and funny. Like this one says Stevie Nicks is my fairy godmother. So make sure, you check that out. And yeah, that's all for today, you guys. So have a great weekend.